Every summer tells a story. For the Miller family, David, Clara, and their daughters Abby and Sarah, the summer of 2002 was supposed to be the epic one. The Great Lakes Tour, in a brand new, slightly ridiculous, bright yellow RV named the Wanderer. A decade later, that trip felt less like a memory and more like a cruel, lingering nightmare. A wound that refused to close. David Miller wasn't just a husband. He was the anchor, the architect of simple, enduring joy. He bought that RV on a whim, driven by a desperate desire to protect the simple happiness they shared. David, a man known for his calm, measured demeanor, had been quietly unraveling for months. His small construction firm had gone under, crushed by a shadowy competitor who, David discovered too late, played by brutal rules. Forever, he'd promised Clara, right before they pulled out of the driveway. This adventure, it's ours, forever. But forever, sometimes, is just a promise the road doesn't keep. Clara, waiting back home for a few days due to a work conference, held the map of their planned route. She was meant to meet them at Lake Superior. It was supposed to be a short separation. She never made it. The last call came on a Tuesday night. David's voice was rushed, the cell signal crackling with static and an unnerving, hollow echo. He sounded strangely distant, strained. "We're by Lake Haven, Clary. Just pulled up. Going for a dip. The stars are incredible here." A pause. A breath caught short. Then, a quick, almost panicked, "I love you, you hear me? I love you." And the line died with a sickening, final click. It was the frantic, final plea of a man cornered. The search began within hours. The desperation grew with every mile of road they searched. They scoured the woods, the phone records, and the few lonely campgrounds around Lake Haven. The lake itself, deep, vast, and notorious for its cold currents, was mapped, probed, and dragged with specialized sonar. Nothing. The RV, the family, the promise, vanished without a trace. The official verdict was drowning, a tragic accident, but Clara couldn't accept the void. This was too clean, too absolute. 10 years. A decade is a long time for a mother to live in the limbo of maybe. The uncertainty was a constant, corrosive companion. The real terror was not death, but the possibility of survival. Every unknown face in a crowd, every blurry photo on a news report, sparked a brief, agonizing hope that David had engineered an escape. This void of knowledge was a deeper, colder pain than any final goodbye. In the summer of 2012, Lake Haven yielded its secret, not to the police, but to a pair of young tech divers. They weren't looking for a lost family. They were testing high-resolution sonar, searching for geological anomalies. And there, 150 feet down, in the lake's deepest, darkest trench, the sonar pinged. The shape was impossible, yet undeniable. A large, rectangular metal structure, sitting perfectly upright on the lake floor. The discovery was immediate international news. The chilling before and after photo, the smiling family beside the RV and the same vehicle now covered in deathly green silt, became a symbol of sudden tragedy. The diving team descended into the past. The water was near freezing, the visibility minimal, the pressure immense. And then, through the gloom, the light hit it. The Wanderer. The bright yellow of summer replaced by the dull, suffocating green of the deep. The true horror wasn't in the decay, but in the details. The damage to the hull was concentrated, suggesting not a rolling accident, but a deliberate impact, almost like a controlled demolition. And the driver's side door, contrary to every expectation, was not fully closed. It was slightly ajar, resting loosely on its latch, as if someone had left in a desperate, frantic hurry. The team slowly forced the airlock door of the RV's main cabin. The interior, coated in a thick, noxious carpet of lake silt, was a skeletal frame of their family life. And yet, the greatest shock wasn't the RV itself. It was what they didn't find. No bodies. The cabin was utterly empty. Even more unsettling, the beds were still neatly made, the linens heavy with silt, as if they had been carefully tucked in before the RV was submerged. It contradicted the frantic nature of the impact. The discovery ignited a fierce, desperate hope in Clara. They weren't drowned. They were gone, yes, but perhaps alive. Detective Rodriguez focused on the RV itself, demanding every square inch be analyzed. Pulled to the surface, The RV was a monstrous, dripping wreck. Forensics found two crucial clues. First, traces of high-octane racing fuel in the gas tank, a mixture David never used, suggesting the RV had been heavily modified for a quick escape. Second, concealed deep behind the radio panel, was a microcassette tape. Not a song. A secret recording. Clara stood in the sterile police lab as Rodriguez played the recording. The sound was muffled, filled with the roar of the RV engine and the sharp, panicked breaths of her husband. David's voice, hoarse, terrified whisper, "Got to get out. They're coming. Abby, hold tight. Sarah, stay down. He followed us from the ferry, Clary. I knew it." He didn't give up. A sudden, violent jerk. A loud metallic thud. David's voice, a ragged cry. "It's the only way. I have to make them think we're gone. They can't follow us if there's no road to follow." Then, the sickening rush of water, the terrifying gurgle of air being expelled, the sound of tearing metal. The terror was immediate. The tape ended with a high-pitched, echoing scream, a sound that could have come from a child, or simply the sound of the world ending. David had not drowned his family by accident. He had driven them into the lake to save them from a threat so immediate, so terrifying, that only absolute erasure was a solution. Rodriguez brought Clara the single, preserved page of a notebook found floating near the submerged RV's wreckage. It was Abby's. Abby's writing. "The man with the mean eyes keeps coming back. He was driving a dark van. Dad said we had to drive faster. He hid Mom's picture so the man wouldn't know we miss her. He said this is the only way to the real new life. We have to be brave for him. I wish I didn't have to be brave." The man with the mean eyes. The dark van. David was running from a specific, relentless entity, a terrifying, ruthless business partner named Victor, who demanded not just money, but silence. The true breakthrough came not from the lake, but from an overlooked corner of the Miller's home. Hidden in the lining of David's favorite fishing vest, a vest Clara had kept because it still smelled faintly of him, was a key. A safety deposit box key. Inside the bank box, there were no valuables. Only two items. A sealed letter and a small, worn, leather-bound book. The letter was long, heartbreaking. David wrote of his failures, the threats from Victor, and his agonizing decision to vanish. He couldn't risk Clara. He knew Victor would use her to draw him out. He had planned the crash as a diversion, a final, catastrophic act of disappearing. David's letter. "Clara, my love, you have to believe I never stopped loving you. The last weeks have been a nightmare. The yellow RV was bait. I switched vehicles late one night. This RV, the one in the lake, it was a decoy I bought cash. The final crash was the only way to stop Victor from following. He was on our tail at Lake Haven. I had to make it look final. We are safe. We are alive. We are waiting." The second item was even more revealing. A small, worn book of poetry that Clara had given David years ago. Inside the back cover, David hadn't written a note. He had etched a map, an old surveyor's coordinate grid, overlaid with subtle symbols recognizable only to Clara. The symbol for their first date spot, the shape of Sarah's favorite stuffed elephant. It wasn't a map to a place, but a key to an area. A remote, forested valley in the Pacific Northwest, a place they had always dreamed of retiring. A final destination. The road trip had not ended at Lake Haven. It had simply taken a terrifying detour. 10 years the lake held its silence, preserving David's desperate, terrifying lie. Now, that silence was broken. David Miller wasn't a victim of an accident. He was a survivor, a protector who chose the ultimate sacrifice, losing his wife to save his children. The map was real. The love was real. The threat, Victor, was still out there, searching for the Millers. But now, Clara had the map, the coordinates, and a desperate, burning hope. The Miller family was not lost. They were hidden. The road trip had not ended. It was simply waiting for the final traveler to arrive. Clara was finally going on her road trip. The silent deep had given up its secret, and now, the hunt for the wanderer was about to begin again. The road home. The discovery of the RV in Lake Haven was the first act. David's chilling message, hidden in a poetry book and a discarded wallet, was the curtain call. The Millers were not victims of the deep. They were refugees, plunged into the cold silence to escape a threat named Victor. Now, 10 years later, Clara Miller had the map. The road trip had just begun. Clara stood in her quiet, empty kitchen, holding the small, worn poetry book. The etched coordinates in the back cover felt like the only solid thing left in her world. She knew David's mind. He wouldn't use digital means. This map was analog, heartfelt, and hidden in plain sight, a tribute to their shared history. It was a route, a direction, but still terrifyingly vague. She saw Victor's shadow behind every choice David made. She knew Victor wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator who never forgot a slight. The uncomfortable ally. Detective Rodriguez, a man who had carried the Miller case like a heavy coat for a decade, was Clara's only ally. He couldn't officially help. David was technically a fugitive who had faked his own death. But Rodriguez understood the fierce, protective love in David's letter. He handed Clara a heavy, worn backpack. "Everything you might need to go off the grid," he whispered. "No phones. No credit cards. You use the old ways, Clara. Cash, burner phones, and your instinct. I'll cover your trail for 48 hours. After that, you're alone." The exchange was tense, weighted with the years of shared grief and the fear of what lay ahead. Before leaving, Clara stood in Abby and Sarah's rooms. Abby's headphones still hung on her bedpost. Sarah's plush elephant sat on a shelf. Clara didn't cry. She felt a surge of cold, focused determination. She closed her eyes and recalled Abby's worried tone, Sarah's innocent giggle. Those sounds, those memories, were the fuel. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply going home. She was bringing them back to the light. Clara had bought an old, nondescript sedan, cash only, no registration trail. She drove west, following the hidden coordinates toward the remote Pacific Northwest. Days blurred into a tense, lonely grind. One evening, pulled over at a dusty, forgotten roadside diner, a man approached her car. He was old, with a grizzled beard and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't speak. He simply placed a folded, yellowed newspaper clipping on her windshield. It was an obituary for David Miller, beloved husband and father. But a single, underlined word stood out in the text, Avenue. He then walked silently back to a rusted pickup truck and drove away. Clara looked down. The coordinates on the map led to Oak Ridge Road. David had known someone was still watching. He had left her a coded correction. The new coordinates, Oak Ridge Avenue, led her deep into a rugged, mountainous area. No cell signal. No towns. Just dense forest and logging trails. She parked the car at the end of a barely visible dirt track. As she stepped out, she noticed a single detail that made her blood freeze. A small, fresh footprint in the soft mud. It was too small for a man. It was the size of a teenager's boot. Abby was close. Clara followed the track, pulling aside heavy pine branches. Through a thicket, she saw it. A small, sturdy cabin, built discreetly into the side of the ridge. It was camouflaged, almost invisible against the backdrop of granite and pine. No smoke, no light, no sign of life. But a faint smell of wood smoke clung to the air. David hadn't just survived. He had built a fortress. Clara approached the cabin cautiously. David's training, he'd been a Boy Scout, a quiet man who knew how to disappear, was evident. She spotted a thin, almost invisible fishing line strung waist-high across the path. A tripwire. As she stepped over it, a faint, high-pitched click echoed from the cabin. It was a silent alarm. David knew she was coming, or he knew someone was coming. She waited in the shadows, heart pounding, straining to hear any sound above the wind. The silence that followed was heavy, deliberate. Then, a voice, sharp and scared, cut through the air. Abby's voice, now 23, but still with a tremor. "Show yourself. I have a warning shot ready." Clara stepped into the clearing, raising her empty hands. "Abby," she whispered, her voice cracking with a decade of unshed tears. "It's Mom. It's Clara." Abby stood frozen in the cabin doorway, not the 13-year-old girl, but a tall, fierce woman, holding an old rifle. Her headphones were gone, replaced by a deep, weary alertness. The moment she saw Clara, the rifle clattered to the ground. The years of protective shell shattered. Abby ran, a whirlwind of tears and suppressed grief, crashing into her mother's arms. A silent, powerful embrace, 10 years overdue. The reunion was raw and beautiful, but short-lived. Abby quickly pulled Clara inside the cabin, her eyes scanning the woods. "You can't be here," she hissed. "It's too dangerous." Clara looked around. The cabin was spotless, organized, yet felt temporary. "Where is your father?" Clara asked, her heart sinking. Abby looked down, her face drawn. "Dad left, Mom. He left 2 weeks ago." "Why?" Clara demanded, her voice rising in panic. Abby pointed to a crudely drawn map tacked to a wall, the same region, but a point marked with an X, near the Canadian border. "Victor found us. Dad made a final deal. He left a trail leading Victor to him. A final decoy. He's trying to end this." "Mom." Alone. The true, final hunt for David had begun. Clara found Sarah, 16, quiet, gentle, curled up in a corner, clutching the plush elephant. Sarah hadn't been home for 10 years, yet she still felt like the 6-year-old who left. Sarah was the one who revealed the crucial detail. "Dad left a letter," she whispered, pulling a sealed envelope from the elephant's ear. "Only to be opened if someone came looking for him." The letter was brief, urgent. David confessed to rigging the final meeting spot, the X on the map, with a failsafe. He knew Victor was too ruthless to be caught by the police. He intended to lead Victor to a remote mine shaft, destroy the evidence of Victor's crimes, and seal them both in forever. "This is the only way to ensure your safety," he wrote. "Don't follow me, Clara." Live. The depth of his sacrifice was a crushing weight. Clara crumpled the letter. Live. Without him. After all this. The slow-burn romance, the unspoken understanding between them, refused to let her turn back. She had waited 10 years for this answer. She wasn't going to let the story end with a decoy and a dead end. She looked at Abby and Sarah. "We're going," she stated simply. "We're getting him back. We're a family, and we finish this together." As Clara prepared to leave, Abby scanning the perimeter, Sarah let out a small gasp, pointing through the window. "That's not Dad's car," she whimpered. Parked almost perfectly hidden behind a stand of old-growth pines was a dark, late-model van. The man with the mean eyes hadn't followed David's final trail. He had simply doubled back to the one place David would never abandon, his daughters. Victor was right outside. "We have to go to Dad," Abby hissed, grabbing the rifle. "He's counting on us to stay safe here." Clara looked at the van, then at the two girls, one fierce, the other fragile. She made the decision that David had once made for them, sacrifice for survival. "No," she said, pulling a gas canister from the corner. "We're not running. We're ending this, right here, right now." She pushed Abby and Sarah out the back door. "Run the final coordinates. I'm going to make sure Victor has no trail left to follow." Clara stood alone in the cabin, waiting for the dark shape to approach the door, holding the canister, ready to light the fire that would finally, truly, erase the Millers' hideaway from the map. The only question was, would she get out alive? Clara stood alone in the dark cabin, the scent of pine and gasoline heavy in the air. She heard the faint snap of a twig. Victor was close. She wasn't running. She wasn't yielding. This was her final, desperate stand, not for vengeance, but for the future. Just as the cabin door handle slowly turned, a shadow flashed past the window. It wasn't Victor. It was David. He burst through the back window, grabbing Clara and tackling her to the floor just as the cabin door splintered inward. David hadn't led Victor to a mine shaft. He had led him in circles, sensing the threat would double back to the girls. He had left a trail only long enough to confuse, then made his own punishing journey back. The confrontation was swift, messy, and fiercely determined. David, fueled by 10 years of protective rage, disarmed Victor. But Victor, cornered and ruthless, reached for a hidden blade. Before he could strike, a fierce, older voice cut through the struggle. "Abby." She stood in the back doorway, the heavy hunting rifle steady in her hands, the lessons of a decade in hiding having transformed her into a watchful guardian. "Stop," she commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of the life her father had sacrificed for. Victor, faced with the Miller family, no longer terrified victims, but three determined, armed survivors, froze. Detective Rodriguez, having traced Clara's last communication before she went dark, emerged from the tree-line, his own weapon drawn. The long hunt was finally over. In the aftermath, Victor was taken into custody, the trail of evidence David left behind finally securing the justice the Millers deserved. The threat, the ghost that had haunted them for a decade, was gone. David, Clara, Abby, and Sarah walked out of the forest together, battered but unbroken. Their RV, the Wanderer, might be a ghost under Lake Haven, but they found a new, quieter kind of freedom. They settled in a small, sunny town far from the shadows of the past. Sarah, now 16, slowly shed the quiet fear, her laughter returning, bright and true. Abby enrolled in college, choosing forensic science, a quiet dedication to ensuring no other family suffered a similar injustice. And David and Clara? Their love, forged in sacrifice and tested by the deepest isolation, was stronger than any vow. Their romance was slow burn, yes, but its ending was a blaze of certainty, built on trust, honesty, and the simple, profound joy of watching their children sleep safely in beds they built together. The Miller family never returned to the highway, but every Sunday, they would sit together, looking at the map, not to trace the path they lost, but to simply be together, present and free. They learned that the greatest adventure isn't finding a road, but finding home. Oh my God, what a journey. 10 years of secrecy, a terrifying plunge into the deep, and a reunion built on the fiercest kind of love. Did this story leave you breathless? Do you believe a parent's love can truly conquer anything? Click the like button if you were rooting for the Millers to find their way home. Subscribe to our channel right now and turn on notifications. We have more emotionally addictive mysteries and powerful stories of survival waiting for you. And most importantly, tell us in the comments below, what was the moment that shocked you the most? The discovery of the empty RV or David's final, desperate message? Let us know. Your engagement helps us bring more unique, heartfelt stories like this to light. This story, at its core, teaches us the most profound truth about human connection. Love is not passive. It is an active, ferocious, and relentless force of protection. We see the ultimate lesson in David's choice. He was faced with an impossible situation, and he chose the most terrifying path, the path of erasure, not out of weakness, but out of an absolute, unwavering commitment to his family's safety. He was willing to be misunderstood, willing to be presumed dead, willing to sacrifice his own happiness for a decade, simply so his loved ones could breathe freely. The lesson for us is this. In our own lives, when we face overwhelming challenges or feel lost in the deep silence of uncertainty, remember the Millers. Remember that even when the road disappears and the world seems to have swallowed your hope whole, the truest ties, the ones built on quiet promises, unsaid feelings, and fierce protective instincts, will always leave a trace. Never underestimate the enduring power of your love and commitment. It is the compass that guides you through the dark, the signal that calls you home, and the silent anchor that keeps the people you cherish safe, no matter how deep the water gets. Hold on to that truth, and know that even after 10 years in the dark, hope is always waiting to guide you back to the light.